we are going to discuss about Geoffrey Chaucer and the 14th century. This will be a part of your MSc 102 paper. Though social history is elaborately discussed in your first paper, but I will also try to give a brief of Chaucer's period for your convenience in second paper also, because we are going to read on Chaucer in MSc 102. Now, what is the 14th century? The medieval period, roughly stretching from 9th to 14th century, was a period of great political and social upheaval in England. The country was heavily burdened with war and plague. The frequency of wars from 1290s onwards and the subsequent cost and span of time it had taken had shaken the state and the society. All of you have heard about the 100 years of wars. So England was engaged with wars with different countries actually, and that has completely changed the social scenario and social foundation of England during this period. The war has actually brought nothing but devastation. Whatever is gained at the end of the war was a different thing, but during this period, England had to suffer a lot because of the wars. And though it is called a 100 years war, basically England was in war with France for 116 years. Conflict with the Scots and the Irish was another subject of tension. And about these three wars constantly for a major period of time, you can refer to MEG 101 for the details of these wars and why it happened and what was the consequences. We are not discussing this in this particular paper. On the positive side, we can witness the nation to grow up with greater nationalistic view. The 50-year reign of King Edward III brought significant changes. Especially during the century, the importance of the Commons in Parliament continued to grow. It was a transitional period in England after many wars, the Black Death, the Peasants' Revolt, and the Reformation in Church. It was also the time that laid the foundation for modern English literature, particularly poetry. Geoffrey Chaucer, who is called the father of English poetry, is considered among the major literary figures of this period. Now we will see what are the major political, socio-political events that have shaped the 14th century society and from where actually Geoffrey Chaucer took his inspirations to write his famous satirical works. Chaucer lived through a time when the society in England went through incredible tension. The Black Death, which ravaged England during Chaucer's childhood and remained widespread afterward, wiped out an estimated of 30 to 50% of the population. Feudalism began to break down, resulting in the labor force gaining more power and bargaining for better wages. This feudalism, about which you have already elaborately learned in MSc 101, was the foundation of 14th century world. Now, what is feudalism and how manorial system worked within feudalism? And that, of course, for that you can refer to MEG 101. And in this paper also, I will discuss a little bit about this. This resulted in strong resentment from the nobles and propertied classes, because feudalism was a very it was a very rich economy for the noble and propertied classes, where there was a strong class division during this period. Rich were very rich and poor were very poor, and we called it the feudal pyramid, about which I will be discussing in this presentation. Another blow was received when in 1381 the peasantry, helped by the artisan class, broke into a revolt. This also we will discuss little bit elaborately in this class. The Hundred Years' War created a social structure in England where people became prone to luxury and comfort. At the end of the 100 year, actually, where England came out as a winner, and after years of war, devastated society, when people actually felt little bit relaxed, actually that led people to luxury and comfort. Now we will see the negative consequences of all this in due course. It doesn't appear suddenly in a society, in the economy, political and religious structure of a society, but gradually it became very prominent, the negative aspects brought by the war and comfort and luxury afterwards. It caused to create a new merchant class. In due course, this class became so powerful that they attempted to control both the aristocracy and the lesser artisan classes. This new merchant class, about which actually, if you have studied prologue to the Canterbury Tales in your graduation, you might clearly remember how actually what Chaucer was criticizing this new merchant class and their behavioral pattern with a mixture of satire and fun. Now, what is the feudal system? Just I am refreshing whatever you have learned in MEJ 101. Feudal system in Europe was predominantly feudal during medieval period. As we have learned, this was a social system in which the king was the owner of all the lands in the kingdom. The feudal lords who would hold land from lords stood after the king in the social hierarchy. Now in this slide you can see the feudal pyramid. We call it feudal pyramid, where you can see that in the top of the pyramid there are the kings, and then comes the nobility, then comes the knights, then comes the peasants, and actually at the end of the pyramid comes the serf. Serf are the actually lowest of the whole pyramid system. Serf are the people, majority of that poor class who actually works in the field, in the agriculture, and the price of which, or the fruit of which, is enjoyed by everyone except the serfs. Okay. And the whole concept of the feudal system was that king, who was the owner of the whole land property of the country, because he cannot use the whole property, he actually gave many of them to the nobility, knights and other classes. Actually, basically the nobility. From the nobility, again, the nobility kept a good portion of the land with them. Rest of the lands were given to the knights to their own use, where they will grow crops and other things with the help of the serf. And with that, not only they will survive, but also they will provide the food to the country. And what was the job of the knights? That in exchange of that land, the knights vowed to give military assistance to the nobility and the king during the time of wars and everything. This was the basic system of the feudal class. The vassal who received land from a feudal lord would take an oath of alliance to him and promise to provide military and financial support in case the latter was in trouble. The feudal lord, in turn, would pledge protection to the vassal against all dangers as and when required. Vassals are those people actually who will give protection to the king and the knight. The lowest of the low were the serfs, who held small strips of land in an open field where they did some subsistence farming, and the condition of the serf was miserable in that period. And this is the serf who constituted the major class of the society. They grew crops for everyone. They provided food to the country, but their own lives always led in poverty. Feudalism was a political strategy that was given the shape of necessity for a class of people. Now, this is very significant. It was not only a social structure during that period, but it was also called a political strategy, which actually started with a noble cause and which meant the hierarchical distribution of the property of the country, where it was supposed that everybody will get the fair share. But in due course, it appeared that it became a necessity for a class of people, for a particular class of people. And this particular class of people was called the nobility. Knights were military people. They were concerned about the protection. But with the passage of time, the feudal system became more complex, rigid, and more prone to abuse and exploitation, and no more remained in natural
Presentation is not visible, ma'am.
Okay.
Presentation is not visible.
Oh, okay. Just yes, now.
Yes, ma'am.
The voluntary obligation of the vassals for military service began to be replaced with service payment. Now, original system of feudalism was that, as I have already mentioned to you, that king gives the access of land property to the nobility. Then nobility is the noble class, that those royal officials actually. And royal officials, after keeping sufficient land property with them, they give the rest of the land property to the knights for use. Then knights, what they do? They use those land property, and in exchange of that, they vowed the king to protect the king and the kingdom during the time of war and other disasters, natural calamity, other disasters like that. And these vessels, which are actually the army, you can say, they always consider it as an obligation to serve the king and the country like this. But gradually what happened, instead of going to the vessels, they started recruiting military in the group, and this recruitment was on the basis of payment. So this recruitment actually what squeezed the possibility for all vassals to work for the king and earn for themselves. Religious institutions like monasteries, abbeys, bishoprics became very powerful and conscious of the hierarchy, being able to provide administrative and military support for the feudal lords. Now we will discuss how church became so Why so powerful? We will come to that later on, but we are now discussing another very important phenomenon of 14th century, which actually began at 1348 and lasted for 1 hour, causing unprecedented loss to the country of England. The terror of bubonic and pneumonic plague, the Black Death, which is actually bubonic plague, it is also called. I will not discuss what bubonic is. You can see this in the internet and you can understand the nature and the effect of this particular disease, which is not relevant here, so I'm not discussing it elaborately. Rather, we will discuss how this Black Death actually contributed in shaping the economy and social foundation of England during that period. Now, this is perhaps the greatest phenomena in 14th century. The general estimate of death was calculated to be 1/3 of the population. About 20% of the villages were either abandoned or completely depopulated by the plague. The survivors fled to the cities in search of life and livelihood. This is a devastation actually, which cannot be described, but then gradually this devastation led to some very critical economic condition in England, also a very significant change in the social structure. The Black Death had immense consequences in the economy of England apart from other areas. Agricultural lands remained uncultivated, which were turned to sheep pasturing. This resulted in increase of raw wool and contributed to the English manufacturing industry. This can be called the beginning of industrial economy in 14th century England. Now, this industrial economy from agrarian economy, before this actually, in feudal system, the whole economy was agricultural based. But after Black Death, when people fled from the villages, agricultural lands remained uncultivated, there was actually no one to cultivate in those lands because major people were dead, and whoever had remained, they went to the cities, particularly to save their lives. And also, whoever was alive, they have to survive by doing something, and cities could somehow provide them all these things. Because in rural areas, people's life were solely controlled by the agricultural product only. The feudal manorial system or economy gradually being dismantled as social system became more mobile, with the peasants moving towards the cities in search of job. Farming became more specialized than mere cereal cultivation prior to the plague. These are some good sides, but in long term, this apparently good sides became also cause of certain very negative aspects in the society. With the growing industrialization and declining cultivation, England witnessed great scarcity of laborers. It brought drastic change in the socio-economic structure of the period. A money economy came into being, replacing the system of forced manual labor of earlier times. Next comes actually another very significant event of this period, the Peasants' Revolt. Why it took place? Peasants' Revolt took place in 1351, 2 years after the Black Death. And this revolt has a very close connection with the Black Death. Following the Black Death, there were shortage of labor class in England as the epidemic wiped out 1/3 of the population. People have not even overcome the trauma of mass death that the Statute of Laborers in 1351 is implemented for fixation of maximum limit of wages during the labor shortage. Now, what is this maximum limit of wages? Because earlier this peasant class who fled from the villages to the cities, they had to work in the factories, but these were not skilled laborers. And also on the other hand, because these laborers, these people earlier, they were cultivators only, farmers only, they had grown all the crops and other farming subjects, which actually easily, with the help of which they could easily live their livelihood in the villages. Now, when they came to the cities, city life is expensive. Even in those days, city life was expensive. And factories were not ample in those days. But on the other hand, and lots of people were swarming towards the cities to work in search of work. And they also asked for means wages. Now there were no fixation of wages in those days, and that's why government, the Royal Court, England, with the Statute of Labourers in 1951, fixed the labour charge for all kinds of labours, where actually men and women were not equally paid. Women were paid less for similar kind of work. This kind of things came into being, emerged, because of which actually this labor class was not at all satisfied, because Black Death has taken everything from them, and though apart from debt, but this noble class, nobility, or the knights or the royal people, all these rich people were not much affected by Black Death. Economically, you can say, economically affected class was this peasantry class only. The spirit which prompted the revolt ultimately led to the collapse of the feudal system. Among other factors responsible for the decline of the feudal order, mention may be made of the influence of Christianity, which preached the brotherhood on one hand and did not condemn exploitative behavior on the other hand. So, Christianity actually came out to be a hypocritical view for many of the people, especially the common people. Actually, they realized that Christianity is not doing whatever they are every day they are preaching. That is already realized by many of the people in those countries. With the passage of time, the power exercised by the feudal lords was lessened with a more centralized royal authority. Most important factor in the whole discussion is the Chars, because the Chars, the 14th century England or the medieval England, and Chaucer has a very close connection. Because we are going to study Chaucer now, we must know the social structure of 14th century and the role played by the Chars in shaping up the social structure of 14th century. Throughout medieval Europe, Christianity was a powerful institution. Please pay attention to the word institution. The church was not, or Christianity was not a religion, rather an institution. And the people were profoundly religious. They followed the teachings of the church, which laid more importance on life to come after death rather than on life in this world. People were enjoined to avoid sin, lead lives of austerity, means strict discipline. Penance means whatever, if you do any kind of sin, if you go to the God for forgiveness, and charity. And charity will give you forgiveness. These are the teachings mainly uh, 'Church' or 'Christianity' spreaded among people. Apart from the secular courts, there were ecclesiastical courts to try more offenses, moral offenses. Ecclesiastical means religious, that means the churches. And in the smaller places, in every village there was a church where there was a bishop or a priest who actually had a lot of control over the people living in those small villages. So in many examples, in many instances, any cases that conflict or anything that had taken place in a particular village did not go to the secular court. Rather, those were solved by the local ecclesiastical, means religious or churches, and people by living by the church. There was unquestioned belief in the teachings of Christianity, and any person who dared to profess views antithetical to the teachings of the church was dismissed as a heretic. A heretic is a person who does not believe in religion. And here the religion means only Christianity. So that means that person who is defying Christianity is defying God. And that is why such people were treated very badly. Rather, in most of the cases, they were burned alive during medieval period. Many heretics faced persecution throughout the Middle Ages. Friars went from place to place, hearing confessions and prescribing penances like giving money for charitable purposes. Now, this is a subject of great satire in Chaucer's works, that friars are kind of official in the church. They actually they move from one place to another. They try to find out who is doing what. In for smaller works of like where somebody is doing a negative thing, something immoral, something, whether it is a big issue or a small issue, they go for hearing confessions. All of you know that in churches there is a provision of giving confession. When I do something wrong, I go to the church and I confess it before the God, and it is thought that God will forgive us. Now, this is a simple thing, but during this period, what happened? As a measure of this forgiveness, they prescribe penances like giving money for charitable purposes. Though it was taken for charitable purpose, but actually this money went to the church, and the church in a particular area is supposed to use that money for the welfare of the local people. Instead of doing that, all the money was gulped by the church officials. Now, gradually they learned that this is a very good and easy means of accumulating wealth. And the church people became more and more greedy. In due course, the moment they understood the trick, actually, that all the people are ignorant, whatever is said to them, they believe, and in the name of God, actually, it is so easy to befool these people. So they befool the people by giving various kind of penances, and for which they suggested money for charitable purposes. Another reason of the church being so powerful was the fact that even the king was answerable to the Pope, the head of Christianity. Now, king is not answerable to anyone, but in medieval England, even the king was answerable to the Pope. Pope is the head of whole Christianity. So, whatever king does, if the Pope wants an explanation from the king was bound to give explanation to the Pope. So all these factors, like for common people, it was like that if the Pope can ask question to king and ask an explanation from the king, then what about the ordinary people? So without protesting, though they realize that something unjust is going on in the society with them, they never dared to ask questions. Now, because of all this, with the passage of time, the church began to depart from the ideals of austerity and piety enjoined by the saints. The wealth accumulated by the church was in a large measure responsible for this. People became very, very greedy, the religious people. Though they preached about austerity, that means discipline in life, and piety, that is the faith in God actually, maintenance of everything, every discipline in their lives for the sake of God, they themselves never followed them. Because a church person, a religious person, should not be attracted towards any wealth. They should learn, or they are always taught to live with the minimum, the bare necessities of life, just food, shelter, and clothes. But the way they could accumulate wealth from the common people, the ordinary ignorant people, most of them were uneducated, uh, illiterate, and they gradually actually themselves attracted towards wealth. People paid handsomely to get the church's pardon for their sins, for it was believed that no man could get access to God without the intervention of the clergy. So what was said. Even today, in the name of religion, people are being exploited. So just imagine in 21st century, if it is happening, what about the 14th century world? The clergy became materialistic, and some of them sold pardons to people who did not do the requisite penance. Pardon was sold. Sold means in exchange of money, other property, anything which actually in individual level actually many of the church officials did. Maybe many of the things never went to the royal court, to the king even, but or maybe even Pope did not know many things, but in the lower areas, in the villages, these lower churches did all kinds of things. The worldliness of the clergy is severely satirized by Chaucer in his prologue to the Canterbury Tales. You have all know this. This is one of the greatest works in English literature, not only by Geoffrey Chaucer, but it is considered to be one of the best and most entertaining work of English literature. It is against the corruption that had crept into the church that a reform movement began all over Europe under the leadership of Martin Luther King. You know all about Martin Luther King, how he found lots of faults in Bible, because Bible was written in Latin language in those days, and most of the people did not understand Latin. Only a very few educated people could read and write Latin language, and that is why whatever was explained by the church people to the common men, common villagers, they always believed on those. But reality was that all those things were never written in the Bible, and this was pointed by Martin Luther King, and you know what happened to him. He was also declared as a heretic. In England, John Wycliffe and his followers, the Lollards, spearheaded the reform movement, which ultimately led to the reposing of faith in the Bible instead of on church dignitaries. What was the outcome of this reform movement? That people were made aware of the fact that church is just a means. It is the Bible to which one should concentrate. Everybody should have the knowledge of the Bible. But what church people are saying is not always important. So as a result of that, you know that Bible was translated into English later on, and then it became accessible to all common people in England. Now, Geoffrey Chaucer, who died in October 25th October 1400, means he lived a major part of 14th century, uh, experienced most of the major social changes of his time and documented them through his satirical writings like Prologue to the Canterbury Tales. Now, prologue is a different, that's which we call the path or preamble, and the Canterbury Tales, as you know, it is an amalgamation of tales by a group of pilgrims. The prologue is a panoramic view of the society of his time where, through representation of people from different strata of the society and social groups, Chaucer takes the freedom of criticizing his contemporary socio-political and religious behavior of the people. Now, the nun's priestess, which is prescribed for your course, is a part of the broader plan of the Canterbury Tales. It is a long narrative poem written in the manner of beast fable, where characters are birds and animals behaving like human beings in a human world. The next lecture will be on the nun's priest's tale.